Good afternoon, everybody. We got about a day and a half, 2 days left in the session. And just a couple hours ago, as you know, I vetoed the education bill. And basically, the reason for that is, in my perspective, the bill really was not negotiated in good faith. We've been working on this for 2 years. The bill is substantially changed, in my opinion, not necessarily for the better. A number of things were left out of the bill as we tried to negotiate and come to some agreement. A number of those things that were left out, for example, were teacher incentive pay, which we had in the bill last year, a robust approach to charter schools, which we would have an alternative authorizers to authorize our charter schools, support for homeschooling. A lot of this was left out in order to try and negotiate something this year. We started off in a negotiation process early in January to try and come to a conclusion. Obviously, that didn't work. And so the bill that came before me that we were hoping we could get additional changes through other vehicles never happened. So in the end, I vetoed that bill. And I understand that probably today or tomorrow, there's a chance that the legislature may pull itself into joint session to ponder an override, and that's their prerogative. That's part of the process. But I just want to say a couple things. My experience in Alaska, once again since about 1983, and teaching since '84, is that once the discussion on money is done, all discussions end. There's no longer discussion on policy. How do I know that? I've been around since '84, teaching, being a principal, being a superintendent, being a school board member. And I'm actually part of all the organizations that were part and parcel of this negotiation. I was part of NEA at one time. I was part of the School Boards Association and the Alaska Council of School Administrators as a superintendent. So these discussions internally are nothing new. What the hope was, though, is really taking a look at where our students score in the NAEP test, for example, that's administered to grades 4 through 8. We're 51st in the nation. There's no denying what the scores are saying. What does that mean? That means we're not really doing as well as we could. And that was really the whole impetus behind policy. We understand, there was never an argument that the schools need money. Absolutely, that's a primary function of the state. But the question is, what form does that money come in into the schools? And what do you do with that money? And I know in the past I've made light of to some extent, but I do believe that the editorial that was put together by the ADN last February 10th, I think is telling. I think it kind of encapsulates what we were looking at then, what we're looking at now, and probably what we'll be looking at in the future. And regardless of the outcome of a potential override vote, I'm not going to give up on the kids. I'm not going to give up on the teachers. I'm not going to give up on the parents. So the questions we all have to ask ourselves is, can we do better for our kids? I think the answer is yes. Can we do better for our teachers? I think the answer is yes. And does being 51st in the nation bother anybody? If it doesn't, it's really concerning. So in the end, the few items that we were looking at that I think could have cinched a deal, from my perspective, was open enrollment, and that's merely a kid going from a public school to another public school. Happens all over the country, happens sporadically in the state, but the idea was to codify this. My experience as a teacher is that not every child is the same, not every family situation is the same, and there are times where children have to, and parents have to pick a school that really works for them. And this would have helped codify that statewide. And I think it would have helped alleviate a lot of concerns on the part of parents and students who may not be doing well at a particular school. That was not in the bill. Doesn't really have robust charter school policies. When we first started out a year ago, we were talking about alternative authorizers for public charters, not private. All across the nation, there's alternative authorizers for public schools and private charter schools. We were just asking for alternative authorizers for public schools because we have wait lists. We have examples of charters not being assisted per se by home districts to get their charters fulfilled and get their schools up and running. And so we thought that was important. There are charter policies in here, but not to the extent we believe are really going to make a difference. And there was no direct funding for the reading incentive grants. So you're 51st in the nation, and we just passed the READS Act just a couple years ago, by one vote, by the way. The primary function of schools in America, going back many, many years in history, was for reading, teaching kids how to read the Bible. This is a long time ago. But nonetheless, it was reading. And we all agree if you can't read or can't read well, you struggle. So here in Alaska, just a few years ago, barely got a bill passed in the closing moments of a session by one vote. And that was a combined effort between myself and Tom Begich and other senators, other House members, but by one vote. So this bill doesn't have incentive monies for the incentive grants for reading to keep our reading momentum going forward. We talked about what Mississippi has done in other states. This was a real opportunity, I believe. And so I had a choice between pretending this bill had game-changing policy in it, which I don't really believe it does. It's got policy in it, but game-changing policy, I don't believe so. And probably the biggest reason is, as I said earlier, the moment you agree on a large chunk of change, the conversation is over. It's not like the education establishment is running me over to get to good policy. It's the opposite. And we'll hear everything from local control to this or that. I even had, I think at one of the press conferences, somebody raised the Moore case. Well, the Moore case says you have to put more money in. The other side of that coin was policy and making sure that kids can learn. And so, from my perspective, my administration will try it again here in the near future to try and get some policies in that will help kids. But I just wanted to read a couple things, I think, from this editorial, because I think the editorial, I think, is going to survive history some time. I hope it doesn't from this perspective. If we're still quoting from this editorial 10 years from now, that means that there was no real meaningful policy put in place to help kids in the state of Alaska. But a couple things I want to read here, right in the beginning, right out of the gate. If there's one thing nearly all Alaskan legislators and Governor Mike Dunleavy can agree on this legislative session that was starting last year, this is when this was written, is that Alaska's public education systems need attention and funding if the state is to improve on a host of priorities, from student achievement to teacher retention. It's as true today as it was then. This is talking about last year, and we took this out because, ironically, the teachers union was not in support of teacher retention, recruitment retention incentives, which would have given a $5,000 to a teacher in an urban school district, $10,000 to a teacher in a rural school district, and $15,000 to a teacher in a very rural school district that has turnover issues. They said no. The teachers union was not in support of this, which is fascinating. But again, the editorial says Dunleavy has proposed, as he did last year, we're talking about last year, incentive program for teachers and then intended to help stem turnover, particularly in rural districts. They do this all over the country now. I mean, you've probably read articles. I think some of you have actually published articles in which we're going to the Philippines for teachers. Okay, I can guarantee you, if we were paying teachers recruitment retention bonus of $5,000 in the urban school districts, $10,000 in rural, and $15,000, you'd probably get some really good teachers going out to rural Alaska. Not to say there isn't, but the turnout over there has historically always been high. This was an attempt to reduce that turnover and help those kids get better outcomes. That was not supported. And it continues talking about the money that would go to teachers. Would be a great incentive to move or to stay in Alaska for a teaching career, particularly for younger teachers, saving to pay off student loans, car payments, home payments, etc. And the editorial board said that Dunleavy's bonus plan should be included in the final package. So again, because of the resistance last year, we didn't include it this year in the attempts to get policy. But nonetheless, we're probably going to be looking at doing that again in the near future here. The editorial board continues on. It says, but simply rubber stamping a large BSA increase doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Dunleavy and like-minded legislators rightly mistrust school districts. Again, how would I know? That was my career here in Alaska, both rural and urban. Rightly mistrust school districts' tendency to grow administration with money meant for the classroom. They point to the fact that student enrollment has declined over the years. That's the other thing you're going to hear is in some districts that they're closing schools. And the stories put out by some of the press, they're written in a manner to get people to think that the reason they're closing the schools is because there's Dunleavy's not giving money to the schools. If you look at some of the districts that are closing schools, usually you close a school when there's few students in the school or not enough students to justify keeping an entire school open. So you move them to another school. That's what happens when you're in a demographic decline like the state is, as well as the entire United States is in demographic decline. So this is happening all over the country. It continues. While a moderate BSA increase is warranted, moderate, remember we went on up to $1,000 extra this year, back down to 680 or over 700. While a moderate BSA increase is warranted, the Dunleavy approach of weighting that support to classroom instruction is the more responsible path. And they talk a little bit about charter schools. Dunleavy has been extremely bullish on Alaska charter schools for good reasons. Why would I be bullish? Well, a Harvard study ranked Alaska's charter schools tops in the nation. And while that study's author cautioned that it didn't investigate the particular reasons why Alaska ranks so high, it's clear that charter schools here are working well and deserve focus and expansion. That was the point. That was the purpose in trying to grow our charter schools. The study also noted that students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and this is a key. The study also noted that students from disadvantaged backgrounds who attend charter schools also outperform their peers at non-charter schools. So, we have a system of charter schools that performs well. The charter schools do well for students that struggle. And so you would think, again, there would be a rush by everybody in the educational sphere, establishment, however you want to word it. But no, that didn't happen. They didn't want it to happen. You're going to have to ask them. And, you know, I'm obviously, you guys are going to do a end of the year look back on what was accomplished this year. But you're going to have to ask the legislature why they felt that this was something that was not worthy of putting in a bill and supporting. And then to the extent we can expand school choices for parents while maintaining strong neighborhood schools, why wouldn't we do so? And then pretty much we'll wrap it up with we didn't get it over the hump this time. We're going to try again here in the near future. Expect another bill by my administration to come out. Again, we're going to keep fighting for kids for the very reasons that were stated in the editorial. We're going to keep fighting for kids because that's the right thing to do. We're going to keep fighting for kids because it's even difficult for me to keep saying this. We're 51st in the nation. 51st in the nation. But that's okay for some. And we're going to keep fighting for kids because if we just give the money out, we will not have this discussion again for 5-10 years. It's happened historically in the state of Alaska. So I feel I have a moral imperative to fight for kids. I'll continue to do that. And for me to agree that this bill is the bill that's going to be a game changer, that simply wouldn't have been the case. And so we vetoed the bill this morning. We'll see what the legislature does. But I look forward to continuing the fight to help kids. So with that, open up for questions, Jeff.
Start with questions on the teleconference line. Let's take our first question from Beth Burge at Alaska's News Source. Beth?
Hi, thanks. Yes, this is Beth from Alaska's News Source. So, Governor, school year is ending, regular session is ending. Everyone in that room knows that. You mentioned your position that this bill was, quote, not negotiated in good faith, end quote. And I presume you're referring to lawmakers with that statement. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? I mean, are you saying lawmakers weren't trying to make it work? And also, if you feel that way, why wait until really the 11th hour to veto this? Why not do it right away?
Yeah, I'll take the last part first, because I always believe you have an opportunity till the session's over. There's always an opportunity. There's other educational vehicles out there in which they could have put in some of these policies that I think would have brought me to the point where I could say, okay, this is not great, but you know what? There's enough in here that we can get over the hump. That didn't happen. And you got to remember, I was a senator too. I know some of these folks. We started out in January, February, with a whole different approach to trying to deal with this, because last year we used the classic approach of committee hearings and so forth. And we put together a team with representatives from both the House and the Senate, and that really didn't go anywhere. And so, no, I think how do you come to the conclusion that something was negotiated in good faith when, again, you're not funding reading unless there's a tax attached to it? How do you come to the conclusion you're negotiating in good faith when you're asking for open enrollment, which means a kid goes from one public school to the next? Hard for me to believe that was negotiated in good faith. And what was the other part of the question?
I asked specifically if you're saying with that lawmakers weren't trying to make it work. I understand they're missing.
I don't
on that one.
Yeah, I don't believe so, to tell you the truth. That's just my belief. You know, I mentioned, I think in a previous press conference, you have states like Arkansas that get budgets done in 30 days. Well, this has been going on for 2 years. These discussions on these small policy approaches. And I know that the groups that represent education were not in favor of these policies. And so, you know, sometimes once these groups lay out their markers and make a statement as to where they are, it doesn't happen. So, yeah, no, I don't necessarily think it was done in good faith. Next question.
Okay, now let's go to Ian Stewart with your Alaska link. Ian, your question, please.
Yeah, some school districts, like the Anchorage School District, were planning on, reinstating a lot of staff that they were planning on laying off. But now with the veto, I guess, what do you have to say to, the school districts that are now sort of thrown into a frenzy now?
What's the last part of that question?
Ian, could you restate the last part of your question, please, and speak a little louder?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you said something about what do I say about school districts doing what or thinking what? Or...
Yeah, I guess what do you have to say to school districts who are concerned about the path moving forward?
We can't hear you.
Ian, you need to speak a little louder, please. No one could hear you.
So what do you say to school districts moving forward who want this money and not going to get the money maybe? Path moving forward.
Path moving forward?
School districts who are
Yeah.
preparing.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We are.
I don't know. It's kind of...
Yeah, well, it's it's a similar thing I have to say to parents and kids. It could have been a better year for all of us. But again, parents that are trying to get their kids into charter schools are going to have to just wait. Parents that want their kids to really learn how to read, the reading incentive grants probably could help, but we'll have to wait. Parents that wanted to send their kid to another public school because it would work better for their child, they're going to have to wait. And so we'll see tomorrow, the next day, what comes out of this legislature. But I think most districts have been following this, and most parents, many parents, I should say, have, and kids as well. And so we can do better in the near future, and we're going to put something together, we hope, We'll just keep trying to make sure we get something across that's going to help kids in a package.
Well, with the Fairbanks Daily News Miner, Jack?
Yes. Governor, are you opposed to, say, one-time funding, or are you looking at calling a special session?
Haven't made the decision yet. We're going to see how this all wraps up here in the next day and a half. There's amazing things that happen in Juneau the last day and a half, and so we'll see what materializes. Then we'll make some decisions looking forward.
Now we'll come into the,
Just on one-time funding?
You say
That includes one-time funding. You haven't made a decision yet on that.
correct?
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
okay, let's go to the room and start with Eric from Alaska Public Media.
Hi. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about the reading incentive grants, which are tied to that tax bill. And basically, it comes down to the question being basically why not collect more corporate income taxes from places like Amazon and Netflix to help Alaska kids learn how to read? It seems like that's something that you object to in the bill, that being linked to tax revenue from those large corporations from out of state. I'm curious, why should Alaska not take money from Netflix and Amazon and other large digital businesses to help Alaska kids read?
So you're conflating two issues here, and you know that. I mean, you are on purpose. Well, you are. So why should reading be held hostage to a potential tax on Amazon? Why is that? Why should it be?
Well, lawmakers have said that basically at the moment
They have no money.
there is no money.
There's no
Oil
money.
is low and going lower.
Are you
Futures
watching
very-
what's happening now? What they're still talking about spending money on?
Absolutely.
Budgets are a priority, and reading was not made a priority. And there was a game played with the tax, is what's happening here. Okay. Now, I've said to the legislature, not just this year, but years past, let's get together and put together a long-term, sustainable approach to fiscals, sideboards, growing the economy in Alaska, competing with other states for investment. And I'm going to actually put together a package for that in the coming year. Even though we talked about it last year, we had the fiscal working group the year before. We've tried this before many times. But no, that's part of what I don't think was done in good faith, to be perfectly honest with you. You're 51st in the nation. And if you think it's so important, reading, we'll give you the money if you pass this Amazon tax. That's why I don't think it was done in good faith.
All right, now let's go to Jazz Garrett with the Juneau Empire.
Hello, Governor. I sat through a Juneau School Board meeting last week with both short and long-term teachers in tears saying that they're leaving the district because the district cannot afford to pay them a livable wage. If you were in that room, what would you tell those teachers? I just heard you say that districts who are now in turmoil, not knowing how to plan for the future, will just have to wait, but teachers aren't waiting, they're leaving.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. They would have had $5,000 each last year, and this year, and the following year, if the teacher retention incentive was supported by their teachers' union. So that's one thing I would say to them. They would have had $5,000 this year, $5,000 next year on that plan, and $5,000 in the following year. That's $15,000. They're not going to see a raise, they're not going to see a equivalent raise to that, regardless of how much money they get, because that's not how districts negotiate. So I would say to them, the schools are going to be funded. Chances are they're not going to be funded at the rate that they want to be funded at, but they're going to be funded. But that would be my answer. Ask them to ask their union why they didn't support $5,000 in their pocket as a retention incentive for this year, next year, and the following year, $15,000. They should go to their unions and say, why didn't you support this in the bill that Dunleavy had was supporting last year in the legislature?
Okay, go to Jeff Landfield with the Alaska Landmine.
Hello, Governor.
Hello,
Chris.
Jeff.
Switch gears a little bit here. I asked the Senate majority and Senate minority this last week. End of session. What was the last book you read or are currently reading, and how is it helping you negotiate the end of session?
That's a great question. I read so many books, Jeff. That is a great question. I read a book on a German fighter ace that was about to shoot down an American B-17 over northern Germany, but let them go. And it's a story about how those two pilots, one in the B-17 and one in the, I believe it was a Messerschmitt, got together after the war. One lived in Canada, one lived in the United States, and they talked about what was the reason behind that. It was a very interesting book about psychology during the war. The title escapes me. It's on my desk over at the house, but it just shows you that even when you have enemies and they're determined to defeat each other and kill each other, there may be times where they find common ground and their humanity comes through. Oh, interesting.
Same book.
Interesting.
Okay.
Governor, Congress is looking at making some cuts to programs, including Medicaid, food stamps, and disaster grants. And some legislators, well, they've passed some resolutions to the delegation, including on Medicaid today, opposing those cuts. Do you think Congress is headed in the right direction, or would you ask them to reconsider these changes?
Well, and to be fair, you know, I've had my head deep in the legislative session, but also in a gas line project and some other investments. I'll take a look at that resolution to actually see what they're asking. But I think the federal government's wrestling with some issues as well, and that's a $34 trillion debt, and how do you deal with that? But I would say that Alaska is, I think, first or second. I believe it's second in terms of federal monies that come to Alaska. My concern is that Alaska may end up losing money in this process. And so, again, Andrew, I would hope that whatever decisions are made at the federal government, that the floor doesn't drop out on states like Alaska. But if they're going to decide to reduce things, that we're given some time to adjust to that would be my best answer.
From Corinne Smith with the Alaska Beacon.
Thank you. So looking at some of your posts before House Bill 57 came to a vote, it seemed like two big issues were open enrollment and then increased homeschool funding that didn't make it into that bill. And so can you explain a bit more, why were those issues worth vetoing or killing this bill?
Because the world is changing. More and more kids are going into alternative public school programs. When a family, when a child and parents are really directing the education of the child in terms of choosing a school, choosing a program, you increase the chances that that child will do well in school. If you limit the ability for kids and parents to take life circumstances into consideration when deciding where they're going to go to school, you increase the chances that that child will be put into an environment that doesn't necessarily meet their needs. And so when you're 51st in the nation, you as a state, you struggled to get folks to get around reading, and your charter schools are the best in the nation. You want to do everything you can to allow kids and parents to have access to the environment, the learning environment that's going to suit their situation. And so when we close those off, when we minimize those, when we make it difficult for that to happen, you lose kids. When I was a school board member in Matsu, we had about 3,000 children in our borough that were not attending our schools. That wasn't only just money from the state, but more importantly, we wanted to find out why that wasn't happening. So we embarked on a mission to try and expand our charter schools, our mission schools. We were the school district that started the middle college concept to help kids. Research shows you that if you can accommodate the needs of kids and parents in a public school setting, you'll keep them in a public school setting. If you can't do it in a public school setting, they're going to go somewhere else. So that's the purpose in doing these policies, is to make the system better, a little more flexible, a little more encompassing. I mean, we just had a lawsuit in the Supreme Court ruled last year, 5-0. There was a law school brought by folks that like to bring lawsuits that the homeschool laws were unconstitutional. The Supreme Court found that was not the case, but that's 22,000 kids that could have been impacted. 22,000 kids. And parents were calling us saying, what do we do? What do we do if this court decides against our kids? Luckily, they didn't. But the point is, it's 2025. People are traveling. People have different lifestyles. Children have issues that they're dealing with, whether it's health, emotional health, mental health, situations that are different. Some are engaged in activities. We should do everything we can to expand our schools, especially our good programs. So if we're not going to do that in the state of Alaska, and we're not going to support reading, then do we wonder why we're 51st in the nation? It's kind of a strange mindset.
Daily News, we'll start with Sean McGuire and then go to Iris Samuels.
Hey, you guys had a great editorial. Did I tell you that about a year ago?
I've heard. Just correction, the Supreme Court didn't decide on the constitutionality of the homeschool.
Tell me what they decided on. Tell me what they decided on. You just corrected me. Tell me what they decided on.
They decided that you would need to have a school district included in the case because it wasn't included, so it's been kicked back to the Superior Court.
They also concluded that on the face, the homeschool laws were not unconstitutional. It's the application that was brought into question. Yes.
Right. Well,
thanks for
there's further proceedings.
Yeah,
we'll
but that's
see
very
about that.
important because the original discussion on the case was going to be that it was basically SB 89 was unconstitutional. That's not what the court found. Okay.
We'll see. We'll see if that continues, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask Governor about if the override is successful. There is funding in the budget, assuming that it is successful. What are you going to do come June, July, when you have a decision whether you veto down appropriations? Are you going to veto down school funding?
Yeah, that's and seriously, that is a great question because what's happened since we put our budget in, the fiscals have gone south on us. That's a fact, and we don't even know what's going to come out of what's left in the session in terms of where that money's going to come from, how we're going to fund it, how we're going to fund the supplemental from this current year that we're in. So I have to take a look at all that before I make a decision on what funding is going to be let to go through for the schools. But and I'll start to make that decision once I see where this ends tomorrow.
Can I just ask a follow-up? I mean, is that fair to make that decision after, I mean, as you have been have experience in school districts, is it fair to make that decision after they've wrapped up the budget process in July?
No, that's when you make that decision, is when they wrap up. Until they wrap up, you don't know what they did, what they're doing. But no. And again, we've had two different things. When we put the bill in last year and then put the bill in here in December, the fiscals, there was a gap in the fiscals, there's no doubt. We asked to go into the CBR. But now that the fiscals have played out, and it looks like this may be a low oil price trend for at least a little while, that decision has to be made to some degree independently of the policy issues. And so we'll see what comes out of this session here in the next day and a half. But the framers of our Constitution wanted the executive to make sure that the fiscals and the funding were done in a responsible manner. That's what we'll do.
Just to follow up on that briefly, from the perspectives of the school districts themselves, I understand what you're saying, but they come at this with, they figure out their budget based on a particular BSA number. They have a certain number of teachers, and then in theory, come July 1st, they may need to realize that they have to eliminate some of those teacher positions. I'm curious what advice you'd give to those school districts that might have to contend with that possibility in the coming couple months.
So again, I worked in schools. I put budgets together. I was a superintendent. I was a school board member and president. We've gone during my tenure, we've gone through ups and downs in funding in Alaska many times. The prudent thing to do is budget for the worst case scenario, because if that doesn't happen, then you have money that you can carry over and save. That's the best thing to do. And that would have been my advice. Now, keep in mind, we tried to come to a decision last year, and we started the negotiations and a negotiation process early in January, February. Historically, this legislature doesn't deal with education until the end of the year, end of the session. We tried to get that resolved back in January, February, so we wouldn't be having these discussions as to what the policies are going to look like and what the money is going to look like.
About open enrollment, that policy idea has gotten a lot of attention in the last few weeks in particular. And I've heard from some lawmakers say that it's really an idea that's promoted by an initiative called Yes, Every Kid, which is funded by the Koch brothers. So I really wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to that and say where you got this idea, when you got this idea, and when you decided that this was something you wanted to push for in Alaska.
Yeah, I got this idea when I was a teacher, principal, and superintendent. That's where I got the idea from. Because again, when you have a child, they all are not cookie cutter kids in cookie cutter families with the same life stories. Some of these kids, for whatever reason, can't go to the school they went to last year because they don't have, maybe the relationships with the kids that they had there have gone south, or with a teacher. So they should have an opportunity to go somewhere else as opposed to just disappear from the system. So what I really love about some of the questions, to be honest with you, Iris, is yes, every kid, Koch funded, a negative connotation. I just read an article that goes back to I believe it goes back to No Child Left Behind, where the federal government has had a policy to allow kids to go to schools, leaving schools that they believe are dangerous schools. This policy has been in place from the feds for years and years and years. I don't think that was a Koch brother initiative. So I would say that you certainly have Koch brother initiatives, and you have NEA initiatives. And sometimes the NEA initiatives are worse than the Koch brother initiatives, in my opinion. But this is public school. This is not sending a kid to a private school. Open enrollment is public school to public school, and they don't even want that to happen.
Okay, and our last question is from James Brooks with the Alaska Beacon.
Hey, Governor. I wanted to return to the subject of SB 113, its link to the education funding, because it's starting to look pretty grim for next year's budget and beyond that. And you had said you wanted to see sideboards and
Going into a fiscal approach this coming year, yes.
yeah, sideboards before there's something like SB 113. Did I have that right?
Yeah. And there's so many taxes and so many numbers. So
I was. Were you referring to, like, you want to see spending cap adjustments before any revenue bills?
You could have spending cap adjustments. You can have, if you have excess I'm talking about a full plan, James, for the next 10 years. You would have spending cap adjustments. You would have diversion of excess funding, where that would go so that could be saved for when we might have a down trough in our funding. You might have higher thresholds to increase taxes. Whole host of things to ensure that we don't find ourselves in this position constantly. And so you're going to see a comprehensive plan put out next year. I can guarantee you, because I've been around for a while, there will be those that will pick apart each part of the plan. But as a whole, I think it's going to be a plan that gets Alaska out of this reliance simply on a diminishing resource over time as oil. I do believe that our oil productivity is going to go up as a result of Willow, Horseshoe, Pika, and others. But we're tied to the ups and downs of oil prices. Yeah, sure.
Wrap that conversation up. I'm going to give you the hard question. I mean,
you and I have both been in this building for a long time. We've seen a lot of these plans come and go. Why should anyone believe that any comprehensive plan will ever pass this building?
Yeah, that is a great question. That is a great question. It should pass this building because it passes other legislatures. It should. Arkansas just got done with their 90-day session, and I think they had 1,000 bills. That's, in my opinion, way too much. But these are bills of substance.
Completely aligned legislature, governor. I think it's all Republican. I mean,
I think
this-
majority is control. That's
yeah,
majority, yes.
and this building is really split, so that's
Yes.
that's part of the issue. Why will this building always?
Did you say, why won't this building?
No, why would this building, which is split control, be able to?
Because you would hope that they could see the writing on the wall. And it's not just the writing on the wall, it's the bat over the forehead. I mean, we have to get out of this mentality of, we're not going to work together with the guy over there because they didn't like him in high school. This is about the future of the state. And I would hope that these folks that are in charge, I would hope these folks that are in leadership would be listening to this conversation. We're going to roll out I think a plan that, if it's adopted, will solve this issue so we can get out of this mess, to be honest with you. But in terms of how will they get to that point, I think their constituents are going to have to tell them they have to. I think businesses in the state are going to tell them they have to. I think nonprofits are going to tell them they have to. What's not going to work is a tax and spend plan. How do I know that? CBR is gone, SBR is gone. 7 years ago, I was told, I don't know what I'm talking about, when I said that the PFD will be gone if this keeps going. PFD is $1,000 right now. So if we don't have sideboards, if we don't have limiters, if we don't have high thresholds for taxes, you just end up with a tax and spend regime, and you end up with a state that becomes a backwater. This is an opportunity, I think. So I can't get inside their heads, James. You guys are doing the reporting. I would strongly urge you to ask that question. What will it take for you guys to come together on a comprehensive plan that takes into consideration the diversity of your legislature? That's all these bills. We got to come together on all these bills, or nothing's going to happen.
So we'll take one last question from Ira Samuel.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on what you just said and James's question and bring up something that I heard from leaders of both the House and Senate this week, which is basically their response to your request that you come together to form this fiscal plan is they want assurances that you will be involved. They say that they feel that you have not been as involved as you could be. So I'm curious.
What does that look like, Iris? I'm just asking. What does that look like? Does that look like, what does it look like? Right? Because seriously, it's a very important question, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm part of the executive branch, right? I'm not the 61st legislature, Big Daddy or whatever they want to call with somebody. I am an executive. I got a state to run, right? It's a big state, so I can't be here all the time. So what does that look like? I would love, that'd be great if they said, if they could just map it out. This is what it looks like. Because this is year 7, 6.5, 7. There are times that I've been here, especially during the close, last month, 2 months, almost every day, still get the same results. Still get the same. In the room. Okay, in the room. All right, and that'll do it. All right, I'll be in the room. Yes.
Any new revenue measures? You haven't proposed a new permanent fund dividend formula for a few years. I mean, in 2023 you did. I think that's the kind of thing that they want you actually producing legislation, having the.
You're going to see it this year. A, B. Is there some reason that I'm missing that they can't also propose comprehensive packages? The internet tax and the vape tax aren't going to get us over the hurdle. But is there anything stopping them? What is preventing them from doing that as well? Fear that I'll veto it?
Yes.
They're exposed.
Huh?
Because they're exposed. If they do
Exposed to
it,
what?
You say, oh, they're bad, they did all this stuff. We've
Yeah,
because it's
you
going to
might
pass
say,
21,
hey, they're negotiating
22.
in bad faith.
Excuse me?
You might say, hey, they're negotiating in bad faith. They're acting in bad faith.
If they are negotiating in bad faith, then they would be negotiating in bad faith, if they are.
They also have the Hillcoat tax bill and the oil.
Yeah, and it's all a tax and spend without sideboards. It's all a tax and spend without sideboards. And we've also got to look at our investment climate so we get more investment in the state so we can diversify our economy. It's all got to be part of that. If not, it's just a tax and spend. Hey, look, some of those guys would love me if I came with an income tax only. They'd love me. I would have solved the issue. Not really. It would have caused other problems. So I'm willing to come in. I'll be in the room. I'm willing to come in with a package, okay? But there's also got to be agreement on sideboards, which was difficult for some folks. And there's also got to be agreement on, do we make our permitting processes, our land use processes, our land lease, land ownership processes more conducive to having investors come up here and invest, as opposed to hanging on to every piece of land we have as if it's a national park? Are we going to compete with the Texases and the Floridas and the South Dakotas, because that's who we're competing with? Or is it just going to be tax and spend? So I'm saying the entire approach needs to happen.
We understand correctly that you're saying you're going to bring that up
Yes.
next session?
Yes.
So you'd
Yes.
support taxes with a spending cap or a sunset commission or some sort of sideboards like that? You'd support additional taxes?
We're going
on
to see what
oil
those taxes look like, what kind of taxes they are.
Okay, let's go to closing comments from the governor. Thank you.
Okay.
It's kind of fun. I kind of like
I'm
it.
in the room.
It's fun.
I'm in the room. So, getting back to the education bill. Raise your hand if you think 51st is a goal to aspire to. Let it be known, no hand went up. Raise your hand if you don't think reading should be a cornerstone of our state's educational approach. Let it be known, a hand did not go up. Raise your hand if you believe that the Harvard study in our charter schools was accurate, that we should not expand those charter schools. Okay. So we're all on the same page. And that didn't happen this year. Didn't happen last year. And 51st is not a recent phenomenon. 51st, if you go back almost to 2011, we were not doing that well. So we've gone through our ups and downs with money, but here is the problem, and I'll leave it with this. Once the money goes in, I'm taking bets. There'll be no serious discussion about policy because that's been the history of this discussion in the state of Alaska. And so with that, the bill has been vetoed. The legislature will have to make its decision on what they want to do. But in the end, again, if kids truly are the most important thing, it's got to be more than just money. It's got to have policy attached to it. Have a great day and a half and a great spring, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what comes out of it. Take care.